Welcome back to Closer Mentality. I'm your host, Julia Mellett. Today's guest, Dr. Ross White, is a professor of clinical psychology at Queen's University Belfast. He calls himself, first and foremost, a psychologist and lover of human nature. His enjoyment of the intersection between mental health and sport performance is a welcome addition.
The high pressure environment is a common theme, so I do a lot of consulting with business executives as well who are experiencing the risk of burnout, very highly committed individuals as well. So there are synergies, if you like, between the work I would do consulting with business executives and also athletes. And I'm particularly interested in trying to strike a balance, if you like, between that drive that we all have within us to strive for good outcomes, to strive for goals and achievement, and to help people really balance that get mode, as I call it, with also the threat mode, which can be there because we are worried about how other people might perceive us. We're worried about the risk of failure. We're worried about looking bad in front of other people. So we do have our threat mode as well. And arguably in modern life, the get mode and the threat mode are all very highly activated. And perhaps there's not enough focus on this third motivational mode, which I refer to as the reset mode. So 3 motivational modes: get, threat, and reset. One's dealing with striving, one's dealing with surviving, and then the reset mode is about reviving. So in the work with business executives and the works with that I do with athletes, you see that, those get and threat modes get very highly activated, and there's perhaps not enough emphasis on the reset mode, and there are risks then of burnout for those individuals that I'm working with.
Dr. White's delineation between get, threat, and reset modes is pertinent outside of sport.
Perhaps I'll begin with the commonalities. So broadly speaking, I think we can think about the reset mode being divided into 2 different types of reset. The first that I'd like to focus on are momentary moves. So momentary moves are things that we can do when we recognize that our stress levels are high or the pressures are there and they're acutely there. So those are momentary moves that we can engage in to help reset. So I like to then subdivide those momentary moves into 3 different categories that all relate to what are called transcendent emotions. Emotions that help us to extend beyond focus on us as individuals. So the 3 different types of transcendent emotions that can be really good for those momentary moves are things like wonder. So really taking a moment to appreciate the vastness of the solar system in comparison to us. Taking a moment to stand under the aurora borealis. We've been blessed, I think, this last 12 months to experience those moments of wonder. So there's wonder. There's also gratitude. So that's a transcendent emotion that is about connecting us with others and those opportunities that we can have to express gratitude towards others. Then there's also this third transcendent emotion, which is about compassion, and that's about demonstrating kindness towards others, or indeed being kinder to ourselves. So momentary moves can be initiated through connecting with those transcendent emotions of wonder, gratitude, and compassion. But then the second category of reset moves are what I call bold moves, and they can often seem almost paradoxical, counterintuitive. And those might involve, for example, taking time, planning time away from the humdrum drive of day-to-day life to allow yourself the opportunity to reconnect with your sense of purpose, to revitalize your energy levels. It may indeed be about stepping away from some existing commitments so that you can have that opportunity to recharge. It may involve plotting and planning a new direction in one's career that helps us to realign with our purpose. Because with the best will and intention in the world, we can start on a track and we can keep going on that track. And eventually we realize actually this is the journey that we really want to be engaged in at this stage of our life. We may be ending up pursuing someone else's dream rather than our own. So having those bold moves to take that time to reset and realign with our purpose can be important too. So I think it's helpful to answer your question to think about the commonality in those reset moves, and what that might look like for the individual will vary depending on the context. That reset will look perhaps a bit different for an athlete compared to a business executive. But even within athletes, Julia, they're a diverse group, really important to recognize that. Some athletes will be at the start of their career, whereas others might be contemplating the transition out of sport. So it's very much about tailoring the commonality to the individual and thinking about, well, how can I help bring those resets into the life of the individual that I'm working with?
When Dr. White works with individuals struggling with their mental vulnerabilities, he tries to keep their passions and purpose at the forefront as motivators.
People can struggle sometimes to talk about their difficulties, the sources of stress, and indeed the sources of distress that they might be experiencing. And it's so important in the assessment work I do with clients to really have conversations that also tap into what it is that they're passionate about, what it is that they're yearning for, what it is they long for in life. And that's a different type of conversation, both of which are really important. But yeah, I'm really interested in the work that I do with clients to talk about their personal values. What is it that they want to really bring through and how they are in the world? What qualities do they want to bring to how they're interacting with themselves or how they're interacting with other people? So that can be a really nice starting point to actually focus on personal values and how the person wants to be, because there can be so much focus on outcomes and goal achievement, and perhaps not enough focus on how what people want to be as they engage in the processes that can ultimately lead to those positive outcomes. So yeah, a focus on personal values and more broadly as well on this notion of purpose. What is it that matters to the person? What contribution do they want to make to the world beyond themselves? And I think purpose is so important on a number of different levels. Purpose helps to vindicate. So it vindicates the sacrifices that we have to make in life. Because if we're working to achieve our goals, it will involve sacrifice. So if we can connect our efforts to that sense of purpose that matters to us, that can help vindicate that. I think also purpose can also serve to motivate when we really connect with what it is that is intrinsically important to us. That can be the fire that really helps to propel us forward. But importantly, I think purpose also illuminates. It helps us to understand the pain and the difficult emotions that can arise as we're working towards something that is truly important to us. Because ultimately, if it wasn't important, then we wouldn't worry about it. So when we experience the worry, it's often an opportunity to appreciate that this is because it's something that truly does matter to you. And that's why the pain is there. Often we have this assumption that success will lead to happiness. And we have seen so many athletes and indeed business executives talk about what's referred to as the arrival fallacy. You work for an Olympic cycle, right, for 4 or 5 years to get yourself into a space where you can compete at an Olympic Games, and your performance at those games could go different ways. People could enjoy high levels of success. They could set a PB on this world stage, or they could indeed medal, which is fantastic, and clearly only a limited number of people can medal by virtue of that system. And they can think to themselves, wow, I've achieved, I've established myself, I have arrived. And then within 24 hours, and perhaps less than that, they can feel this massive void, this sense of emptiness, and this almost sense of despair about, well, where to next? And what am I going to direct myself towards now that that cycle has completed? So it's the arrival fallacy. There's a sense that once we achieve success, then life will finally make sense and we'll be complete. But often people are left to feel emptiness as opposed to a real sense of fulfillment. And I think one of the problems with contemporary understanding about success is that it's a binary thing, right? You either succeed or you don't. And for me, success is about traveling well in pursuit of the goals that you might be setting, holding yourself to a high standard, but doing it with a level of self-compassion as well, and being able to commend and appreciate yourself for the sacrifices that you've made, for the performance that you've been able to deliver, good, bad, or indifferent, and to recognize that there are opportunities to realign with that sense of purpose that does matter to you. So, yeah, success too often regarded as a binary thing. For me, it's more about the processes that we're engaging in and engaging in them well so that we allow those personal values that matter to us to come through in how we are in the world.
Dr. White pulls the anecdotal motivation styles that he teaches his clients from the world around him. Humans, of course, are fraught with examples, but nature also finds forms of resilience.
I think there are certainly things that we can learn from nature about how we can thrive. That's really what inspired me to write my recent book, The Tree That Bends, How a Flexible Mind Can Help You Thrive. And it really does draw on the anatomy and the functioning of a tree as a central metaphor to help us understand, well, what does it take to thrive? So for me, I think this idea of psychological flexibility is a great thing that demographic can use nature as a reference point to kind of apply in their own life. So just like the tree has its anatomy, right? It has its roots that anchor it to the ground. Well, I think it's important for us to be anchored in the here and now. Too often in life, we're thinking about stuff that's happened yesterday, or we're worrying about stuff that's going to happen tomorrow, what we might be missing on social media, right? So it's important to come back to the here and now, be anchored in this time and place. Trees have their trunks that will bend in the wind, that will sway, that absorb some of the energy from the wind, and the tree can use that, if you like, to right itself by that elasticity that the trunk has. And likewise, I think we need to also be willing, like the trunk of a tree, to lean into some of the difficult emotions and feelings and thoughts that will show up in your day, that show up in my day, that it's too easy for us to try to distract ourselves from, right? And social media is a great distraction. It's a great procrastination. And in some ways, it's maybe easier than showing up to some of those icky feelings and thoughts that we experience. So, yeah, I'm working with my clients to help them use strategies to be more willing to lean into the stuff that they might be motivated to try to avoid or distract themselves from. And then the tree also has its crown, which is the leaves and its branches that allow it to photosynthesize, to really harness the sun's energy to fuel the tree. Well, we have our source of energy, if you like. It's the opportunities we have to be empowered by our personal values and by our sense of purpose. So yeah, nature is the teacher. Be anchored, be willing, be empowered. And that's how we can really embrace the psychological flexibility to thrive in the here and now.
Dr. White's process is steeped in ACT, or acceptance commitment therapy, a form of behavioral therapy aimed at addressing deep feelings and creating appropriate, targeted responses to difficult stimuli. It's an innately hands-on approach to handling hardship, and one which Dr. White has seen pay dividends with his clients.
I'm really interested in acceptance and commitment therapy, or acceptance and commitment training, also referred to as ACT. I'm a trainer of the approach. I have benefited enormously from learning from other trainers of the approach. And ACT as an intervention is really interested in helping to build psychological flexibility. And athletes and business executives get the notion of psychological flexibility. People can understand the benefits of physical flexibility and how that can help prevent injury, help to rehabilitate following injury, the benefits of yoga and being more pliable and supple for our circulation, for our mind as well. So when people start to recognize the importance of psychological flexibility, that's a great way in, right? So people understand that notion of flexibility and how it can be important for both body and mind. And I really have found ACT as a form of support really helpful for both business executives and athletes, and they seem to derive good benefit from it. And I worked with some colleagues to put together a book which was really aimed at practitioners, people like sports psychologists, coaches, also those who are involved in supporting the mental health and well-being of athletes too. And it was called Acceptance and Commitment Approaches for Athletes' Well-being and Performance. And the subtitle was The Flexible Mind. And yeah, after writing that book, Julia, it was a bit like, well, that's great that it's out there for practitioners, but I'm really keen to try to reach people directly, people who are committed to excellence in whatever they might be doing, school teacher, accountant, NFL player, soccer player, whatever that might be. So that motivated me then to write The Tree That Bends. And the title comes from a Tanzanian proverb. So the wind does not break the tree that bends, which is a metaphor that I first heard whenever I was doing some mental health related work in sub-Saharan Africa. And the name of the book just crystallized around that metaphor. And yeah, so I've always been fascinated by nature, whether it's forests, coastal blue water by the sea, inland blue water, lakes. And I just thought, yeah, let's help people learn more about themselves and in the process learn more about nature. And the book flowed from there.
The Tanzanian proverb, "The wind does not break the tree that bends," is used to illustrate the idea that flexibility and adaptability are crucial in order to navigate life's challenges. A tree that is more malleable to wind is akin to a person able to adapt and who's willing to embrace new situations. It's an ideal that Dr. White utilizes in his daily practice to such a degree that he opted to put pen to paper and publish a book on the implications of living life in such a way.
So people again will draw reference from the worlds in which they live and the environments in which they live, but also the languages that they speak. And that fascinates me, how we understand the emotional experiences that we're having and how we talk about them. And I remember hearing a number of years ago this metaphor that, as I understand it, is spoken in the Welsh language, right? Which is a form of Celtic language spoken by a proportion of the population mainly living in Wales as part of the UK. And the metaphor, the idiom, the linguistic expression of the distress was he has his head buried in his feathers, using the analogy of a bird. And you may have some personal experience or seen some images about how birds, when they're cold or when the environment around them is quite difficult, they will bury their head in their feathers to try to warm themselves up or to protect themselves from threat. So that idea about someone who's experiencing some mental distress and struggles burying their head in their feathers was really a powerful visual image of what that person might be going through. In the Irish language, you don't say, I am depressed. The way you express it is that you say the depression is on you. The depression is upon me. And for me, I think that opens up so many other avenues about how you can then talk about what you might do to help alleviate or mitigate the circumstances that you're actually under. Whereas in English, we define ourselves on the basis of the state that we can experience. We say, I am depressed, which can feel really oppressive as a way, we're equating ourselves with the state and, in terms of wiggle room that might afford compared to other ways of expressing it linguistically. But in places like the UK and perhaps North America, you can tell me if I'm wrong here. We might say things like, I am blue, I feel blue. And in the UK, if I was to speak to someone about that, they would recognize that what I mean by that is that I feel low in mood. But if I was to say that to a colleague in Uganda or Rwanda, they would be deeply confused by that. That idiom doesn't translate that well. So yeah, I'm fascinated by language, by different cultures, and how people will find ways of sharing with each other what might be going on for them that perhaps make no sense to somebody beyond that cultural context. In the book, one of the points that I'm at pains to emphasize is that we have thoughts and feelings. Those thoughts and feelings don't have us, right? And as difficult and as oppressive and as challenging as particular emotions might be, there are things that we can do to shift our relationship with those thoughts and feelings so that they no longer block or impede our progress towards those goals that matter to us. And that's what ultimately psychological flexibility is. It's about having difficult thoughts and feelings and still doing those things that matter to us. So shifting the relationship so those thoughts and feelings aren't blocking us from doing the stuff that matters to us.
Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless of if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human in this world going through a hard time, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a positive way. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible. This is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options just in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. If this sounds like something that could help you, there's a link in the show notes to get you started on your therapy journey. It's betterhelp.com/closer mentality. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. Because finding a therapist is a little like dating. If you don't really fit with the therapist matched with you, it's easy and free to switch therapists without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/closer mentality. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/closer mentality. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this channel. Did you know that you can purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore? With Libro FM, you can pick from more than 325,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from real booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there, you know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports your local community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to squeeze more reading into your busy life. Listen with the free Libro FM app while you do chores, walk the dog, or relax at home. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations from the people who know best, booksellers. Closer Mentality has partnered with Libro FM on a special offer. Through the link in the show notes, you can get 2 audiobooks on Libro FM for the price of 1. Offer only valid for new members in Canada and the US. Thanks to Libro FM for sponsoring this podcast. Dr. White finds that practitioners who utilize social media to enhance their following's mental engagement tend to trend toward successful messaging. Though he did make the deliberate note that not all mental health-centric content is made equal.
An important point that I want to emphasize is that social media can serve to reinforce really compelling messages about what it seems is important for success. And there are very persuasive, very compelling practitioners out there who have had really rich experience in elite, high-stress environments who do a great job at promoting these messages. And it's that kind of David Goggins, Jocko Willink, taking the photo of your watch at 4:30 a.m. To start your day, and running along, doing your endurance run, and talking to camera, and finishing your video with "Stay hard." And yeah, that's a compelling sell, and it's almost picking up on some of those doubts and insecurities we have within ourselves about, well, am I being productive enough? Hey, I'm only getting up at 7 in the morning. Should I be getting up at the 5 a.m. sort of start? Or am I staying hard enough? Or am I being too soft on myself? And I'm not going to dispute the value that some of those qualities can have in terms of being gritty, being committed, being conscientious, being hardworking. That stuff's all good in some regards, depending on the context. That's important, because some of those traits, whilst they might be excellent in the gym or in the treadmill or on the roads, they may not lend themselves particularly well to other environments, other contexts, like a home life, where we're trying to maintain intimacy in our relationships, right? And taking time to take care of other people as well as taking care of ourselves. But the point that I think the psychological jiu-jitsu speaks to, and psychological flexibility speaks to, is the idea that, well, in particular contexts, it's going to be important to bring forward other traits, dare I say, less sexy, less compelling traits, like, the rest well as a catchphrase doesn't really stack up to the stay hard type, David Goggins thing, but it's important. It's really important. Be kind to yourself. How many likes might that get compared to some of those more compelling stories about gritty sort of attributes? But this stuff really matters. So we have, if you like, a skewed sense of what seems to be really important. There's a bit of a bias in what comes through on our social media feeds, because the extraordinary stuff tends to get highlighted more than the ordinary, but no less important stuff.
When a person encounters adversity, Dr. White made a note that they tend to respond with one of 2 attributes. They either channel grit to push through, stemming from anger or a chip on their shoulder, or they use resilient tendencies to reconfigure their mental toughness toolkit into a solution. When asked which direction leads itself more likely towards success, Dr. White alluded to the innate situational differences of grit versus resilience.
Great. It depends. I'm such a psychologist with an answer like that, aren't I? But again, I'm going to bring it back to context. So resilience is a word that gets bandied around a lot, and it's a catch-all phrase that can be used to capture distinct elements of our experience. So, for example, resilience can be used to highlight somebody who goes through adversity, has a dip in their level of functioning, but then is able to quickly come back to the kind of normal level of functioning. Now, that can be called rebound resilience, right? That idea of, okay, initial dip, but come back and they're back at it, performing as they were. Resilience can also be used to describe someone who has an experience of adversity but remains unaffected by that adversity, and that's referred to as robust resilience. Then you have people who experience adversity and seem to come back stronger for it, right? And that's the idea of post-traumatic growth that Tedeschi and Calhoun highlighted and has become quite popular in our understanding of high performance environments. But the important thing about resilience is that it's indexed from an experience of adversity, right? And that begs the question about, well, what if somebody's been ticking along? There hasn't necessarily been anything that's been traumatic or adverse in their day-to-day experience. Can we still use the notion of resilience? So, yeah, I think resilience is a helpful concept, but it maybe refers to a particular set of circumstances and it has to be understood in a very nuanced way. Well, what do we really mean when we're using that word resilience? Grit is the work that Angela Duckworth has done, and it's based on her work with in educational settings and military settings that have really served to highlight the importance of grit for success in the longer term. And grit can be thought of as, yeah, this sense of having a passion. So being clear on something that is important and matters to us, and having, if you like, the perseverance to see it through. But one of the criticisms of grit is that, well, is it not really conscientiousness? Is that not what we're talking about here? And what might grit be offering that's different from this quality of conscientiousness that we've known about for a long time? And another concern for me about grit is, well, does it value consistency over adaptability? So I could consistently, in a gritty way, bang my head up against a brick wall. And it's not really going to do the wall that much good. It's certainly not going to do my head much good. But arguably, it's fitting with this notion of conscientiously, consistently, in a gritty way, doing something. Whereas the adaptability piece is, well, uh, this isn't working as a strategy. I need to change up. And perhaps that's where grit falls down because it doesn't really speak to our capacity to change up when we need to. So, certainly in some circumstances, those qualities of grit or conscientiousness are going to be valuable. But if we are just blindly applying grit as the key, irrespective of what the circumstance is, irrespective of the need for us to actually be adaptable rather than consistent, then grit can start to fall down.
Dr. White, an avid Japanese jiu-jitsu fan, turns the perspectives of his teaching into what he refers to in his book as, quote, psychological jiu-jitsu. How does one flow through life maintaining grit, yet allowing adaptability enough to maintain composure in the face of adverse scenarios?
It's more about the psychological flexibility piece. And why am I banging on about psychological flexibility? Well, the benefits I think that it offers in addition to resilience is that psychological flexibility doesn't need to be indexed against adversity, whereas the resilience does. So I can absolutely be psychologically flexible in how I respond to adversity, but I can also be psychologically flexible in the absence of the adversity too. So I think that's where it perhaps has a broader range of application. And I see psychological flexibility as a really important contributing factor to our ability to be resilient if and when the adversity does come.
The psychological frameworks that Dr. White utilizes with his clients have also been acknowledged by the World Health Organization, which Dr. White provides with acceptance commitment therapy training skill development.
So I've been fortunate to collaborate on research projects with the WHO that have evaluated ACT-based forms of self-help, and the intervention's called Self-Help Plus. And yeah, the WHO did extensive work to ensure that it was linguistically and culturally adapted for refugee populations in Uganda. So South Sudanese women who were being accommodated in Uganda. We did a research project evaluating Self-Help Plus with them, and it was shown to be successful. And then we also did a research trial in Europe, and I was leading the UK site in this European trial that sought to evaluate Self-Help Plus to see if it was effective at reducing the likelihood of refugees developing mental disorders. So again, there were positive findings. So Self-Help Plus is now being disseminated globally through the WHO webpage. It's being translated into over 20 different languages. It's been used to good effect with Ukrainian refugees following the unrest that has happened in Ukraine, and also with Syrian refugees following the conflicts that have happened there. So great opportunity to work as part of international teams evaluating the work that the WHO have coordinated. The joy of the work is in the interaction, whether it be an athlete in front of me, a business executive, whether it be working in conjunction with some of my international colleagues around those projects, whether it's the interaction with you in this conversation that we're having, it's humans doing human things, right? And that's the aspect of the work that really excites me, having the interaction. And yeah, I hope I can be of assistance to others, that they can learn some wisdom from me, but oh gosh, I learn so much from other people, and that's a great thing too. So yeah, I tend to boil it down to ultimately the interpersonal interactions and yeah, the work, it's interesting, it can be challenging at times, but it's also inspiring, which is really lovely too.
Dr. White's line of work is toolkit related. He is more than capable of facilitating epiphany moments for his clients. But they also have to do the mental and emotional work within themselves to open up and find their own purpose and motivation.
A key purpose for me is to really help people connect with their sense of purpose. And there's a lot talked about, this idea of find your why, right? And people like Simon Sinek have done great work around the importance of not just focusing on the what, right? The kind of outcome, not just thinking on the how, right? The processes that you engage in to get to your what, but also your why. Well, what is it ultimately that is motivating you to engage in those processes to get that outcome? So yeah, start with why. And yeah, he's talked about find your why. And it's kind of like you walk around the corner and you trip over something. Oh, there's my why. It's been there all along, right? I don't really subscribe to that. I think that our why is formed. It's not found. What do I mean by it's formed? Well, I think the kernels, the seeds of our purpose are already there in the things that bring vitality into our day-to-day life. And we really have to tune into that. We have to listen to what it is that makes our heart sing, that gives us that sense of inspiration and that sense of joy, and really to cultivate that. What can we do to nurture that nascent sense of purpose that could be there for all of us? So I really want people listening to connect with yeah, people can feel about, oh yeah, there's all this chat about purpose and what is my purpose and when am I going to find my purpose? It's already there. It's just that you need to form it, to cultivate it, to nourish it, to develop it. Listen to what it is that brings vitality into your day-to-day experience and try to do more of that.
Are you an athlete rehabbing from an injury? Are you a coach or athletic trainer seeking additional support for your injured athlete toolkits? KT Tape has exactly what you need. KT Tape is a rehabilitation tape that helps stabilize and compress sensitive areas of the body during exercise. Apply KT Tape to an area either in pain or in recovery and feel the difference. KT Tape is comfortable, stable, and long-wearing. There's tape for all modes of action, from gentle, which is safe for easy activity and everyday use, to pro extreme, for athletes in moderate to high impact exercise. KT Tape makes water-resistant tape as well for a more adaptable rehabilitation implementation. KT Tape caters to lifelong athletes and focuses on reducing muscle soreness for all users when worn during exercise and up to 48 hours post. Are you an athlete in need of prescription sports goggles or sunglasses? Today's final sponsor may have just the solution for you. A Sight for Sport Eyes was created when founder Shannon Knight saw a niche that was perpetually going unfulfilled. A Sight for Sport Eyes grew out of a need for education surrounding the impact of sport-related eye injuries and their lasting repercussions. A Sight for Sport Eyes runs like a regular optical practice, not an e-commerce store. Their goal is to give you the same high-quality service and name-brand lenses made by the best optical laboratories in the country, geared specifically for athletes and athletic use cases. If you need new lenses or frames, A Sight for Sport Eyes is the perfect place to get them. The links to BetterHelp.com, Libro FM, KT Tape, and A Sight for Sport Eyes are all in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 113 of Closer Mentality and Ross's story. The link to his new book is in the show notes, as well as the link to watch he and I's full interview on the Closer Mentality Uncensored YouTube channel. Before we close for today, I do want to put out a scheduling notice. Closer Mentality is moving to Tuesday mornings. All the amazing stories of triumph and success, one full day earlier. I have some amazing stories to share in the months of May and June, and I can't wait for you guys to hear them. But until then, I'm your host, Julia Mellett. See you next week.